Camcorder Cameron here. Today I watched Dune Part 2. I caught the 11:40 showing. There were 7 other people in the movie theater with me, and it was fantastic. So I just want to give you all of my thoughts. Spoiler alert, they're all positive. So if you're a Dune hater, click off now. So here's my very quick spoiler-free review before I get into the spoilers. TLDR, I loved it. I think it's the best blockbuster we've had in a very long time. It was a spectacle, and it was perfect in every way. This was a perfect sequel because it took everything that the first Dune movie had and expanded upon it, made it a lot more rich and action-packed. The first movie had a lot of well-placed exposition and character introductions. This movie starts off with us immediately knowing the world we're entering in and all of our characters. So we could just pick up right where we left off and get right to the meat of the story. While the movie does take its time introducing new world building and new characters, it does move along at a breakneck speed in comparison to the first movie. Now, I'm the type of person who doesn't enjoy big war scenes, a lot of battle. That's not usually my thing, so with all that in mind, you may be surprised that I'm a Dune lover. But I love Dune because it really develops the plot and the characters, and it makes the action feel necessary, and it makes me have somebody to root for in my heart of hearts. And it also introduces a lot of mystery elements that keeps me on the edge of my seat, wondering what's gonna happen next. How are all these little plot lines gonna span out in the end? The sense of scale and gravity in this movie is immense. The storyline is filled with so much dread that the action scenes never feel triumphant. Even after our cast of characters wins a battle and they're all celebrating, you have like this sinking feeling of your heart that this great unholy war is coming. So there's not much to be happy about in the moment. Alright, enough with my generalizations. I want to get into some examples, so spoilers may be ahead. Tread carefully if you don't want the plot spoiled. So something I was really wanting to see in this movie was a lot more of the sandworm scenes. The first Dune movie gave us just a little taste of the sandworms. You know, it came in sort of at the end and we just saw a character riding a sandworm in the distance, which left us being like, oh my gosh, I hope Paul gets to learn how to ride a sandworm in the next movie. He did, and it was so epic. Everything about it was so cool. I almost wish we had like a little bit more time to get some like Karate Kid wax on, wax off like training scenes with Paul. I wanted to see how you even go about teaching somebody to ride a sandworm. Instead, we just hear about Paul being trained to do it, and then it's his final day of trying it on his own. And he just so happens to like call the big granddaddy worm and takes up this whole like position that's written in prophecy. And it's just a moment that gave me full body chills because the music ramps up and they show the drawing and they show him, and it kind of reminds me of like watching surfing movies, the way that he's riding the sandworm and the sand dunes are like splashing against him. Did not disappoint on the worm front. I got many worms in this movie. I loved seeing the whole armada of Iraqis riding sandworms. It was so epic in the final battle whenever they came in riding sandworms. I love seeing the Reverend Mother, Jessica, being transported in her little like wicker womb on top of the sandworm when she was traveling south. That was epic. I've used the word epic 5 times already. Can you tell how much I love this movie? And I'm not done talking about the worms. We got Granddaddy Worm and we got baby worms. Okay? I was not expecting to see baby worms, and it was so cute. and then she drowned it and sucked the blood out, which, it seemed like a very ritualistic death, so I don't think they're cruel for doing it. It is just kind of harsh to be like, oh, it's a sweet little baby sandworm. Oh, that's how they get the blue poison blood. They get it from the babies. But that scene was awesome too. I loved the worms. I hope we get even more of them in the future. They gave us so much worm, but I could have used more worm. Just saying. The worms are very cool. And centipedes were mentioned. Big centipedes and small centipedes. I was hoping we were going to see those. I did want to see a little bit more of like the creatures on Arrakis besides like the little desert mouse and the sandworm. I wanted to see some more of the natural things that survive on such an uninhabitable planet. Little disclaimer here, every time I mention that I wanted to see something or I hope to see something and I didn't get to see it, that isn't a critique necessarily of the movie. That just comes from my passion of the movies, and I could honestly sit in that movie theater for 6 hours and be so happy the whole time. I think that these movies, they're long, but the longness is what makes them so great. So the cast just blew me away in this movie. Everybody was giving their A game. Not a single actor in this movie didn't give it their all. It all felt very authentic. Zendaya, she always is so beautiful and wonderful and so good at acting. She gives the impression of wearing her heart on her sleeve because she's so emotive, and you can kind of feel everything that she's trying to portray her feeling very successfully. Timothée Chalamet did so wonderful in this movie. We got to see a great range of his acting skills because Paul in the first Dune movie is very understated and subdued, and he's naive and still learning about his origins and his destiny. And we see a tiny bit of that Paul in the very beginning, but this is his coming of age movie. This is where he steps into his prophecy roles and he becomes domineering in a lot of ways. So, it was great to see him play both very subdued and not wanting to follow along with his destiny, and then, do not listen to me! Did your mothers not teach you about me? Like, wow, that was really good, Timothée. I loved that. Me personally, I've never found Timothée Chalamet to be a very intimidating figure, but this movie, after he drank the worm blood, he became very imposing and kind of had me shaking in my boots a little bit. He's such a, and I mean this in the best way possible because he's obviously gorgeous and successful, but he is of smaller stature and he's skinnier and he's playing a boy pretty much. I don't know how old Paul is supposed to be, but he's young. So he's playing this young guy, he doesn't compare to all of these big muscular Harkonnens that he's battling, right? But man, after he drank that juice, he was scary. Even with his skinny little legs walking up sand steps, somehow they made that really scary. And that seriousness of Paul's character really culminates in two big scenes. The first one being whenever Paul is in the south stepping into his Messiah shoes. They're having this big ceremony and he is supposed to fight and kill Stilgar to take the leading man role. But he refuses to do that. It's a real shocking turn of events whenever he refuses to defeat Stilgar, because this is a cultural tradition of the very people he's trying to be the Messiah of. But he steps up and he's like, it's my world now. I am not going to waste his warrior abilities, okay? And it's the first time we really get to hear him yell and be confident in himself. And it kind of comes out of left field because the last we heard Paul's inner monologue was before he drank the worm blood. And he's confiding to Johnny and he's like, I don't want to go to the South because I don't want to start a war, right? But then he ends up having to go to the South anyways. He drinks the blood of the worm, comes back to life from the dead, and he's sort of quiet. He's not saying too much until this whole ceremony happens and he's yelling at everybody, you know, in the best way possible, like a general hypes up his soldiers before battle. The second shocking scene was whenever Paul walks right into the Emperor's spaceship and he just slits the Baron's throat. He's like, "Hello, grandfather. Now you die like an animal." So cold, so heartless. Where is our, like, moody boy that we got to know and love? He is gone. Now that he's wearing his father's duke ring, he has taken over his father's position. Another scene, I lied, it's not just two scenes. Another big scene where Paul shocks you and you see his character shift is whenever the Madam Queen Bee, Reverend Mother Bene Gesserit, the one that wears all black, you know, tries to interrupt Paul whenever he's talking to the Emperor, and he's like, "Silence!" And he uses the voice on her, and she like stumbles back. She's so taken aback by him, and she is disgusted. It's like kind of sacrilegious, I guess, in her head to have a man wield so much power that historically the Bene Gesserit are all female. He's not supposed to have that much power as a man. And she is probably the most powerful character we've met in the whole movie so far. So to see her cower under his voice was honestly satisfying and scary. Florence Pugh is a new character. I loved the introduction of the Princess Iluran because she is a very important big role in the book. Noted, I haven't finished the first Dune book. I'm still working my way through it, but pretty much in between every single chapter of the book, we get a diary recording or a historical text recording from the Princess Iluran. We didn't get to see her at all in the first movie. I think Florence Pugh was perfect for her role. She was so regal. Her costumes that she wore were the best in the whole movie. She sort of like reminds me of like a sexy Russian spy. She's very on the outside, beautiful and innocent seeming because she's this sheltered emperor's daughter, but she is underneath very smart, and she was trained by the Bene Gesserit way. So we don't really see all of her hand yet, you know? She's very interesting. She keeps secrets from her father, which surprised me. She has a strong sense of duty and loyalty to her Reverend Mother, so she does as told. She was more than willing to step up as Paul's bride in order to protect her father's life. She's like, "Hey, I'll be your bride if you don't kill him, okay? Spare him. You had your Victor." Which, speaking of Victor, that makes me think about Fade, who is another new character introduced in this movie, played by Austin Butler. I think that Austin Butler was the standout performance of this whole movie. He did such a great job. He was unrecognizable as Fade. He was menacing, like a black hole of a character. He was crazy and evil for the sake of being evil. And I loved that. Sort of like the Joker or Harley Quinn. He was kind of that villain who's just like out of their mind and has joy from inflicting pain on others. He also really reminded me of Dracula because he had his like 3 little pet seductive women that he would feed humans to, which I loved. I think one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie was the battle triangle arena. I don't know why, but during this battle scene, it switches to be monochrome. It's Fade's birthday, which means he gets to be gladiator style in this arena, showing off his power by fighting the last 3 surviving Atreides men. Now, these men are drugged, I guess, because he's a spoiled nephew of the Baron, you know? They're drugged, so he's a shoo-in to win the battle. You know, you can't have the nephew be losing on his birthday, except it's been rigged. One of the men isn't drugged, and this is a test. The Baron thinks it's his test to have his nephew prove himself worthy of being gifted Arrakis, but really, it's the Reverend Mother's test. It is the Bene Gesserit plan. Just like everything else is planned out by them, this is another thing that they planned out to see if he's worthy of impregnating one of the other Bene Gesserit maidens, right? Because they're always thinking about reproduction. And that battle scene is epic. It is so good. It does remind me a lot of the Star Wars prequel. I did think about Attack of the Clones whenever I saw the Baron sitting up there watching this gladiator fight. I was like, yeah, I can see Jabba right now. I did love the relationship between Fade and Paul. They are cousins, but they are natural enemies. So you expect there to be animosity from both sides. Fade is a very power-hungry character. You would expect him to just want nothing more than to destroy the Malhabib. But Austin Butler portrays on his face a sense of admiration. Whenever Paul walks into that Imperial ship and he slits the Baron's throat with his worm-tooth knife, now that's Fade's uncle. But Fade isn't upset. Fade isn't mad that this guy that he's fighting killed the Baron. He is just kind of in awe. It feels like he looks up to him just a little bit. He's impressed. He's like, wow. I don't know how to describe it besides that. It's just a little character subtlety. I really like the relationship between Johnny and Paul. I think that Johnny's character represents the way that the audience feels about Paul. She likes him as this foreigner trying to fit in to her. She likes that he's this underdog protagonist that everybody thinks is gonna fail. She's the one person that wants to see him succeed and believe in him. And us as an audience, he's our protagonist. We saw his whole family and everything he knew and his father get obliterated in the last movie. And we just want to see him come out of this situation on top. As the movie progresses and as Paul changes and starts to believe in himself as this Messiah figure, or whether he believes it or not, he is stepping into this role as a Messiah figure. She sees this character shift in him and she's not liking it. We see Paul shift from this clear-cut protagonist underdog into a more morally gray leader, and Johnny's relationship to him reflects how we feel about that big character change. She's not sure that she even likes him after all of this. She feels a bit betrayed by him, and in a lot of ways, like, I can see where she's coming from. I can see how she would feel used in this situation. Her birth-given name was literally in reference to this prophecy. A prophecy she doesn't even believe in, a prophecy she wants nothing to do with, and one of the things that she bonds with whenever she's falling in love with Paul is she's like, hey, my real name is Desert Spring, but I don't like that, I just like Johnny. And he's like, I like Johnny too, I like you for who you are, and she likes him for who he was in that moment. She's staying the same, she's staying true to who she is, while he is going through all of these changes, and she fulfills that prophecy, and he makes her. And that is where the real betrayal comes. I think that his fatal flaw as a boyfriend was just not telling her these things. Like, if he truly had respect for her, I think that he would be like, hey girl, I know that you do not want to cry tears and resurrect me from the dead, but I'm gonna go drink this blood. She arrives to the south and he is dead on the floor. And she is so upset and confused about why he would do this. She feels blindsided. She doesn't want to cry even though she loves him and she knows it'll bring him back to life. She doesn't want to do that because she's so mad at him in that moment. And Jessica takes the decision away from her by using the voice on her, commanding her to cry and bring him back to life, which really, really, really upset me. This is our protagonist female and she's just being used. And she was very resistant to the prophecy and the choice was taken away from her, which I think reflects the greater message of the story, which is that you have a say, but sometimes life takes over and it takes the choice away from you and you're just stepping in these predestined footprints that you're always meant to walk in. Another way that I also think that Paul could have been more respectful to her if he truly loved her. Another betrayal. And if I was Johnny, I would break up with him and not ever want to see his face after this too, was whenever he was like, as long as I breathe, I will love you. And then he's like, Mr. Emperor, I'm going to take your daughter as my bride. And he like publicly humiliated Johnny in front of her whole family in that moment. Because everybody knows Everybody knows about Paul and Johnny, okay? Everybody knows. Even Fade, who had just seen them both in his eyes for the very first time, he's like, oh, Paul, you like her. She's your pet. Like, it's palpable, their connection. It seems like even the bride could tell what was going on there. I'm calling her the bride, I mean the emperor's daughter. She could tell what was going on there because the connection was palpable. And Johnny was so shocked and taken aback for the second time. Strike 2, Paul. 2 strikes, you're out, okay? A hot girl isn't going to give you that many chances. Even though I'm criticizing it, because I do think it's devastating for Johnny's character, I liked it as a plot device to have him say that he loves Johnny and wants to be with her, but ultimately choosing the political alliance. Because, you know, traditionally and historically, marriage has always been a political and wealth thing. Marrying for love is a very modern idea. This is also reflected with Paul's father, who loved Paul's mother, Jessica, but never married her. Because his father taught him that it was a way to have more power, keeping his betrothal open. It would make other houses more willing to work with Atreides. So it was more like a political. He's like, I can't marry Jessica and lock it down and have all these other people turn away. Like, he's trying to keep the doors open so people are still interested in him. And, you know, obviously Paul learned that from his father. But yeah, from a girlfriend perspective, I would be over it. Once you publicly humiliate a woman, there is no going back. She went off and she rode that sandworm, and she was like fighting the tears, which is very shocking because we never see her cry really, except for whenever she resurrects him from the dead and she's told to, because it's a big Fremen belief to save all of the water you can. They're like, don't waste your tears. You suck in the tears, right? So that's a big waste. But after, you know, she ran away from that whole situation of Paul betraying her, there were real tears in her eyes. So I don't know what's going to happen next with Zendaya's character. She was our final, like, closing shot, was her angry face and her hurt face. So, I mean, there's probably not much power she has and not much she can do, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she went all like the bride, Kill Bill on him after this. You hurt me, let me hurt you back. Let me be a spy or something. I don't know. But I have other things to talk about. So besides Austin Butler, Rebecca Ferguson is my other standout actress for this movie. She did a wonderful job. I loved Jessica and the fetus. Oh my god, every scene of Jessica and the baby was amazing. I didn't expect a fetus to be such a big character, but it was. That fetus was calling all the shots. Oh my god, what a powerful baby. I loved her. I loved seeing her in fetus form. I loved seeing the baby soak in the poison and seeing that cloud of blue, you know, surround the embryonic fluids, and then the baby like opens its blue eyes. That was so cool. I really loved the scenes where we would just see Jessica like, what? Talking to her belly. That was really funny, but in a good way. Like, oh my god, she looks like a crazy person, but she's very spiritual, and that baby's talking to her. Similarly to Paul, I loved seeing Jessica's character arc go from this damsel in distress that we're rooting for, you know, the mom that's just trying to help her baby survive these tragic times of despair, into this unholy, like, raging figure. I don't know how to describe her. She was so menacing. She was serving face this whole movie. Her eyes were just seething with wicked intent. Oh my god, she clearly is just doing all of this to prove her reverend Bene Gesserit mother wrong. How dare you not believe that I'm the one? Let me show you that I am the one and my son is the one. And she's so determined in proving that fact that she's willing to risk her son's life. Yeah, she probably does have some predestined knowledge, especially from her magical baby telling her what the future will hold. But also, like, as a mom, that is kind of crazy to just be like, yeah, everybody, when my son comes here, let him drink poison, because she's so certain that he's gonna come back. I think that is a tough call. And not the loving mom that we saw in the last movie. Not to say that she isn't loving, because she is. Like in that final battle, whenever Paul gets stabbed in the shoulder, we see that look of despair and all of that fear get caught up in her face. She's like, oh my God. You know, she was so caught up in believing the prophecy that I feel like she momentarily felt like her son was invincible. And to see him get stabbed, she felt fear. Even though fear is the mind killer and it goes against her training, she loves her son so much that she did feel fear in that moment. So she does love him, but she is just so much more menacing and wicked with her expression, and I love the baby. We only got to see Anya Taylor-Joy in the flesh in one scene whenever Paul is like having a prophecy where she's like communicating and she's like, brother, I love you. We're in this together. So beautiful. I love Anya Taylor-Joy. But honestly, I kind of like her more as a fetus, because it's so cool seeing a fetus like telepathically communicate with the mom and be like, what are you seeing, Mom? What's going on? Tell him this. So cool and creepy. Another favorite moment of mine is whenever she looks so hatefully at the Reverend Mother. Every time Paul does something badass in front of the Reverend Mother and Jessica just like looks over at the Reverend Mother like, look, do you see what I'm seeing? I love seeing that. I love seeing the Reverend Mother get walked all over. But I don't trust her. I still have this feeling of mistrust because, again, I feel like they know everything. I feel like they've planned out everything. There was a scene where the Reverend Mother talks to the Princess Ilaran and she's like, you know what you have to do. You have a role. Your father, he is going to fall from the throne, but you can be our hope. Are you prepared to do your task? And the princess is like, I am prepared to do the task. And then later on, whenever she agrees to be the bride, you know, that is the Bene Gesserit way, is kind of their whole like breeding schemes. And we see that whenever they have one of the Bene Gesserits mate with Austin Butler's character and conceive a baby that way. So I believe that the Reverend Mother did tell the princess that it's her duty to bear the child of Paul Atreides. But again, we didn't see that conversation outright. So it's still kind of up in the air on if that's what's going to happen or not. And Paul, he makes that political decision to take her as a bride. So it does seem like that's going to happen. It seems like, yeah, if he's going to impregnate anybody, it doesn't seem like he's going to impregnate Zendaya's character, which is kind of rude. I was waiting for that because the movie does like show that they're having a physical connection in that way. And I was like, Johnny's going to get pregnant. I don't know how she didn't. I guess because she's fighting in wars. Can't really conceive like that, can you? Speaking of babies, the reveal that Jessica is the Baron's daughter, oh my God, my jaw dropped. And the way that they reveal it was so clever. Because Paul is again having a vision that we are seeing depicted. Visually, we see a baby. And we think that this baby that he's seeing is going to be his sister after she's born. Because that's the only baby that we see in this whole thing. But then it's revealed, oh, the baby's looking at the Baron. You're the Baron's daughter. Whoa, that is crazy. So crazy. I don't really remember from watching the movie if they ever talked about like where Jessica came from, but I know from the book Jessica was adopted from an orphanage by the Duke, and she doesn't know where she came from. The Duke didn't know where she came from. She was just in a Bene Gesserit orphanage. So that was a reveal to me. I knew she came from an orphanage. I knew they didn't know who her parents were. I don't know why I didn't see it coming, but I guess because the Harkonnens are such bad guys, I never expected them to have the bad guy blood in them. Which again, it makes me think of Star Wars. Makes me think about how Luke Skywalker is the son of Darth Vader. That was an interesting line when he says, we survive because we're Harkonnens. Oh my god, and then it makes you think of his premonition about the unholy war and how he's going to start a war and so many people are going to starve and die because of him. You think, oh my god, is that because he's taking these steps to become one of the bad guys? Become one of the colonizers? But again, he seems to want to fight with the Fremen and defeat this whole terrible spice production, raiding of their natural resources. He wants to see Arrakis become a paradise. And originally, whenever we hear him say paradise in the beginning, we think about that biology room we see him and his mother escape from in the last movie, where it's the only green we've ever seen on Arrakis in this biology land. And they tell us that that was their original intent. Thousands of years ago, whenever they came to Arrakis, they wanted to make it into this green paradise until they learned about spice, and then the number one priority was harvesting spice. Well, he wants to see Arrakis become this paradise, which sounds like this beautiful green utopia. And we think of that green biology room and what it would look like if a whole desert planet was covered in lush ecosystem, which honestly doesn't really make sense. I know we're in the future, but just think about all the animals that, where would the sandworms go? They would drown. Anyways, all that aside, it becomes less of a hopeful phrase, and it kind of reminds me a lot of a cult leader saying, let's lead them to paradise. Kind of makes me think of lead them to heaven, lead them to the paradise that is death. We'll see. We'll see if the desert turns out to be lush and green, but I don't even know how that would happen. Mr. Director Denis Villeneuve, you blow me away again and again. He directed one of my favorite movies, which is Blade Runner 2049. I think that we really should just keep giving this man work, keep giving him more Dune movies to direct. I don't want to see another Dune movie if it's not directed by Denis. Honestly, he is amazing. Also, Greg Fraser, the cinematographer, did a wonderful job. So many dynamic shots, so many times where I would just get chills on my arm. Whenever Paul was resurrected from the dead, I literally got chills. I haven't mentioned this, but another element that I really loved was the whole afterlife. I loved seeing the afterlife ceremony of the Fremen. That was really cool. I think that the way that a culture handles the afterlife is very just informative to their beliefs. The Fremen are all about water conservation, and usually whenever they kill people, we see them take their life water and use it for other things. But whenever we see them dispose of a Fremen body, we learn that they take the water, but they never drink the Fremen lifeblood. Instead, they pour the water into a reservoir of everybody else's life water, which is really spectacular. You see how ancient this ceremony is by just how much water is gathered, and it's beautiful. And it also gets your heartstrings whenever you see the Harkonnens destroy the Fremen civilization in the north. It gets destroyed whenever the Harkonnens attacked, and it's really sad because that is such a sacred place. Terrible. It reminds me of in James Cameron's Avatar, whenever we see the Avatar tree get attacked. Kind of that same thing, where it's a very sacred religious place where your ancestors and the spirits go. I have so much to talk about. I feel like I'm getting on rambling at this point. I have a lot to digest. These are just my passion thoughts that I'm saying to you guys after I just left the movie theater. Oh my god, what a whirlwind. I can't recommend it enough. I want to go see it again. I loved it that much. I'm sure there's a whole bunch that I didn't get to say or touch on. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. What did I miss? What are your thoughts on this movie? Did you love it as much as I did? I hope you do, because I really just want to talk to my lovers out there. Oh my god, when the movie was over, I just didn't want to go back to reality. But alas, I must get back to reality. So I'm signing off for now, but first let me tell you guys how much I love my Patreon supporters. They are my everything. They bought my movie ticket today. They don't make me feel guilty whenever I want to go see a movie in the movie theater, which these days, you guys know how expensive that is. So you know, if you want to support me in this channel, please consider checking out my Patreon. You get videos early over there, and you also get to see fun little like camcorder vlogs I make. Thank you to my lovely Patreons. Okay, until next time, Camcorder Cameron signing out.